Goldie Hawn had been one of the most loved women in Hollywood for over 50 years. She made the world laugh, won an Oscar, and built a career that most actresses can only dream about. But here's what most people do not know. Behind all that laughter and all those hit movies, Goldie went through 2 painful marriages that left real scars. She struggled, she searched, and then she found something she had never had before. At 7 to 9, she is finally opening up about the one man who changed everything for her. Not just a love story, but the kind of bond that most people spend their whole lives looking for and never find. This is that story. The moment she knew he was different from everyone else. The thing that made Kurt Russell the one for Goldie Hawn was not what most people would expect. It was not his looks, even though by all accounts he was very good-looking. It was not the chemistry they had on screen, even though that was obvious to anyone who watched them in a film together. It was something much more specific, and Goldie has talked about it in interviews in a way that makes it impossible to miss. In April of 2024, Goldie appeared on a podcast hosted by Conan O'Brien and told a story about the moment she knew Kurt Russell was a man she wanted to build her life with. She had 2 children from her previous marriage, Oliver and Kate, and she brought them to the set of the film they were working on together. She watched how Kurt handled them. Not how he performed around them to impress her, but how he genuinely engaged with them, how natural it was, how clearly he cared. That was the moment. She said it was not his attractiveness or the obvious chemistry between them. It was the fact that his devotion to children matched her own, and that was the most important quality she could find in another person. That is a specific kind of love story. Not the lightning bolt version where 2 people lock eyes across a room and everything else disappears. This was a woman who had been through enough to know what she actually needed, watching a man reveal his character through the way he treated her kids. And what she saw made her certain in a way that nothing before had. They had actually met long before any of this. Their first meeting was in 1966, when both of them were working on a Disney film called The One and Only Genuine Original Family Band. At that point, Goldie was 21 and Kurt was only 16. She noticed him and thought he was genuinely cute. Nothing happened. Obviously, they were young. They were at very different stages of life, and neither of them was in a place where anything could develop. But she remembered him. And 17 years later, that memory came back in the most unexpected way. In 1983, Kurt auditioned for a film called Swing Shift, which Goldie was starring in. He showed up the morning after a late night, feeling rough and a little nervous. When Goldie walked into the room, he said the first thing that came into his head, which was a comment about her appearance. It was the kind of thing that could have gone very badly. Instead, she smiled and took it as a compliment it was meant to be. The ice was broken. Something started. Their first date was, by any standard, memorable. They started the evening at the Playboy Club, dancing together to swing music. Then they went to a house Goldie had just purchased, but she did not yet have the keys. So they broke in. While exploring the empty rooms, police arrived and they had to leave and finish the evening at a hotel instead. Kurt later described that night as a lot of fun, which is a significant understatement for what sounds like one of the more memorable first dates in Hollywood history. From that point, the relationship developed quickly. Once filming started on Swing Shift, they spent more time together and the feelings became undeniable. What Goldie kept noticing, beyond the obvious attraction, was his honesty. He was not performing anything for her. He was just himself, completely and without any attempt to manage her impression of him. In a world where she had dealt with people performing versions of themselves constantly, that quality stood out more than anything else possibly could have. 2 marriages that taught her what love was not. To understand why Goldie Hawn responded so strongly to what Kurt Russell offered her, you need to understand what came before him. Because her path to finding the right person ran directly through 2 marriages that both ended painfully, and both left her with a very clear picture of what she did not want. Her first marriage was to a man named Gus Triconis, a dancer and actor who had appeared in West Side Story. She met him in the late 1960s when both of them were in the performing world, and she was immediately drawn to him. She has said she felt from very early on that she wanted to marry him. They got married in Hawaii in May of 1969, and for a while things were good. But Goldie's career started taking off in ways that created an imbalance between them. She was becoming a rising Hollywood star. He was struggling to find consistent work. The gap between where their careers were heading kept growing, and with it came distance and tension that the marriage could not absorb. They separated in 1973. The divorce was not finalized until New Year's Eve of 1975, and by that point, Goldie had already met someone new. Her second husband was Bill Hudson, a musician and actor who was part of a group called the Hudson Brothers. They met on a flight from New York to Los Angeles, and the connection moved fast. They got married on July 3rd, 1976, and had 2 children together, Oliver and Kate, both of whom would go on to have their own successful careers in Hollywood. But this marriage had serious problems from very early on. Bill Hudson has been open in interviews about his experience of the relationship, and his account is one of deep pain. He described himself as someone who was completely committed to the marriage and to building a traditional family, but who felt that Goldie did not share that vision. He said she wanted more freedom than that structure allowed for. He filed for divorce in 1980. He has since spoken about feeling like he was gradually pushed out of his children's lives as well, which became a wound that stayed with him for many years. From Goldie's side, the picture was different. She has not responded in detail to all of his claims, but she has been honest about the fact that both marriages ended and that she carries the weight of that. She raised her children. She kept moving forward. She found ways to be the person her kids needed even when her personal life was in difficult territory. What both marriages gave her, even through the pain, was clarity. She knew by the time she met Kurt Russell in 1983 what she was looking for. She knew what a relationship looked like when it was not working, and she knew what ingredients were missing. The honesty she saw in Kurt, the way he treated her children, the absence of any performance or pretense, these were not small things to a woman who had been through what she had been through. They were exactly the things she had been searching for without fully being able to name them. She has never described the ending of either marriage with bitterness. She describes them as chapters, difficult ones, but chapters that led somewhere. And where they led was to a first date involving a break-in, a visit from the police, and a man who made her feel something she had never quite felt before. What their relationship actually looked like up close. Goldie Hawn and Kurt Russell have been together since 1983. That is more than 40 years. They have never been legally married, and that detail has followed them through every public appearance, every interview, and every milestone they have shared. People have asked about it constantly, and they have answered it honestly and consistently. Goldie has explained her position on marriage in ways that reflect genuine thought rather than a casual rejection of tradition. She has said that watching divorce happen repeatedly, to friends, to family, to people she knew well, shaped her understanding of what marriage actually means in practice versus what it is supposed to mean in theory. She has spoken about the financial and emotional cost of divorce, the way it damages children, the way it leaves people worse off than they were before. Her conclusion was that she did not need legal paperwork to be committed to someone. What she needed was a daily decision to choose that person, and that was something she could make without a ceremony. She once said something that captured this perfectly without making it sound like a philosophy or strategy. She said she liked the idea of waking up every morning and choosing to be with the person she was with. That choice, made freely and repeatedly, was more meaningful to her than any formal commitment could be. Kurt has expressed the same view, in his own way. He said in interviews that when people kept asking them why they were not married, both he and Goldie had the same reaction. They could not understand why anyone else cared. They asked their children about it, and their children were equally unconcerned. That was enough for them. In practice, what their relationship looks like is a genuine partnership built on decades of shared experience. They appeared together on stage at the Oscars in 1989, joking publicly about the marriage question in a way that showed they had found their own comfortable language around it. They worked together on screen in Overboard in 1987, a film where the chemistry between them was so visible that audiences felt it immediately, and they appeared together again in The Christmas Chronicles on Netflix in 2018 and its sequel in 2020. Kurt explained in an interview why they did not make more films together over the years. He said there was no requirement for 2 people who love each other to work together constantly, and that when they did choose to work on something together, it should be because the project was right, not just because they were a couple. In 2017, both of them received stars on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. Their ceremonies happened close together, and Kurt used his speech to say something to Goldie in front of everyone present that became one of the most talked-about moments of that day. He told her directly that he owed his wonderful life to her. He told her he cherished her. He said no number of stars in the sky or on the boulevard could compare to what she meant to him. Goldie later said in interviews that she had no idea he was going to say what he said. She was completely caught off guard by the beauty of it, And that reaction, the genuine surprise of a woman who had been with this man for decades and still did not see that coming, said everything about how he continued to show up for her. At 7 to 9, when Goldie says he was the only one who could make her feel that way, she is describing a lifetime of evidence. Not a feeling from the beginning, a conclusion reached across more than 40 years. The family they built and what it says about them. One of the things that makes Goldie Hawn and Kurt Russell's story genuinely different from most Hollywood love stories is what they built around them. Not just their own relationship, but a whole family that has stayed close and connected across decades in an industry that tends to scatter people in every direction. When they got together, Goldie already had 2 children from her marriage to Bill Hudson. Oliver Hudson and Kate Hudson were young, and they became part of Kurt's life from the beginning. He also had a son of his own, Boston Russell, from his previous marriage. Then in 1986, 3 years after they started dating, Goldie and Kurt had a child together, Wyatt Russell. That brought the blended family to 4 children, and by all available accounts, the household they created was a genuinely warm one. Kurt's relationship with Oliver and Kate has been a consistent theme in how both Goldie and her children had described the family. Kate Hudson in particular has been vocal and public about what Kurt meant to her growing up. She has used the word stepfather and has been clear that he filled that role in a real and meaningful way. She has also talked about her closeness with her mother in terms that reflect a family dynamic that prioritized connection above almost everything else. Their children have grown up to build their own lives and careers. Oliver Hudson became an actor. Kate Hudson became one of the most recognizable actresses of a generation and also built a successful business career. Wyatt Russell became an actor as well. Boston Russell has stayed more private. As their children grew up and started families of their own, Goldie and Kurt became grandparents, eventually to 7 grandchildren. Goldie has talked about how much she wanted to be a grandmother even before it happened, and the reality of it clearly brought her enormous joy. In 2023 and 2024, the family went through some unsettling experiences when their Los Angeles home was broken into twice. Goldie described the first incident in detail during a podcast appearance, explaining how she and Kurt had gone out to dinner and returned to find that someone had gotten in through a balcony and forced open her closet. The second break-in happened while she was home alone, which shook her significantly. After that, they made real changes to how they lived, including adding security and eventually relocating from their Malibu home to Palm Desert, about 2.5 hours inland. Their daughter Kate took over the family home they left behind, the house where she and her siblings grew up. She has talked in interviews about a deep attachment to her family and about the particular energy that exists in the Hawn-Russell household. She described the family as genuinely nuts in the best way, full of different personalities who all share the same commitment to enjoying life and to each other. What the family they built reflects is exactly what Goldie identified as a quality that made her choose Kurt in the first place. His devotion to children matched hers. She watched him with her kids on a film set in 1983 and knew, 40+ years later, those kids are adults with their own families, and the household he helped build is still close, still connected, and still passing forward the values that started it. That does not happen by accident. It happens because the right people made the right choice. What 40 years of choosing each other actually looks like. By 2025, Goldie Hawn and Kurt Russell have been together for over 41 years. They walked the Oscars red carpet together in March of that year, Goldie in a bright yellow gown, Kurt in a classic black tuxedo, holding hands and looking entirely comfortable in a spotlight they had shared dozens of times before. Kurt was asked how he felt about their time together and gave an answer that was completely in line with who he has always been throughout this relationship. Simple, direct, and genuine. He said he loved the fact that they met and were still doing it, still choosing it, still enjoying each other's company. Goldie has been increasingly candid in recent interviews about what makes their relationship actually work, past the obvious factors of love and compatibility. In September 2024, she said directly that physical connection matters and that people in lasting relationships should not pretend otherwise. She said that what connects two people in that way creates a sense of belonging that is hard to replicate through other means. She also talked about the fact that they communicate honestly about the ordinary challenges of long-term partnership, including the reality that attractive people exist in the world and that acknowledging that openly is healthier than pretending otherwise. She used the word elasticity to describe their relationship, explaining that it bends without breaking and stretches without snapping. She also talked about what she called the most basic requirement for staying together, the genuine desire to be with a person.